Hello and welcome back to Civil's Matrix. And in this video, we're going to learn about a very prominent chapter of modern history, which is the beginning of modern nationalism as well as the initial years of the Indian National Congress. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So, first of all, there have been many institutions and many associations which were formed before the Indian National Congress. Although Indian National Congress was the one which came into prominence and played a much greater role in the Indian freedom struggle. However, we should not ignore the efforts of the precursors to it. So basically, why were these organizations formed? What were the factors which led to the growth of this rising discontent, rising dissent among the general public, among the citizens of British India? First of all, was the political unification of the country, which was facilitated by the British. So basically, there was growth of railways, there was telegrams, so the communication system was enhanced. Like you could actually communicate with people who were sitting in Bengal to the one who is sitting in Bombay Presidency. So it's just like a communication link was established, and it was more easier to spread the word around, like more easier to disseminate your ideas, and that what was leveraged by the leaders of then. So, as you could see, there was a political unification or a geographical consolidation of India. The frontiers like this were established. Earlier, we were more into loose units of princely states, but now there were direct as well as indirect control of the British, like direct control in terms of the presidencies, which they were ruling in, and indirect control over the princely states. So there was this northwest frontier whereby we were receiving a major threat in the medieval history. This was kind of demarcated by the British, like it was more secured from invasion coming from here. Likewise, you could see there was a demarcation over here from Mandale, or which is known as a part of Myanmar, the current Myanmar. Then, the other factor which led to the growth of this rising discontent was the rediscovery of the India's glorious past. Until then, we were told that there is a racial superiority of the Europeans. They are far better than Indians in many aspects. But then, because of the efforts of a few leaders like Swami Vivekanand and some leaders like Dayanand Saraswati, who emphasized on going back to the Vedas, going back to the roots, going back to our traditional roots. And it was also discovered that the Indo-Aryans as well as the Europeans, they trace the same common root, like they belong to a same ethnic group. So this was a boost to the self-confidence of the public. So like we could actually stand tall and stand at par with the Europeans in that sense. Then there was this Indian Renaissance or the social religious movements which were taking place in order to reform the Indian society within, because there were many diversions and many social evils which were like uprooting the unity of the society. For example, there was sati pratha, there was child marriage, like prohibition of widow remarriage, and all sort of their things, and mostly the caste-based discrimination. So the different reformers worked on different fronts. For example, it was Raja Ram Mohan Roy whose efforts were recognized by the 1829 legislation for the abolition of sati in the Bengal presidency, and it was later on disseminated to the rest of the India as well. Then there was Western influence. As you could see, like because of the growth in travel, there were many sea voyages. There were many Europeans coming in, many Indians going, like many prominent Indians going to Europe for their further studies, and there they were accustomed with different Western liberal ideas and Mostly, they were inspired by the French Revolution, its idea about equality, liberty, and fraternity. They were also inspired by the different philosophers like Voltaire and their ideas about secularism, which actually gave them a modern outlook towards what an ideal society should be like and what we as an Indian society were lacking. So therefore, they provided a new perspective to the people, and it just established a link of globalization. So globalization, which we see right now, is a more widespread and a more interconnected world. But back then also, like because of the sea routes and all sorts of communication links, the trade routes settled. You could see that there was some sort of information exchange going on. Also, since like India is a country of diverse languages, there are different distinct languages, and English basically helped as a facilitator of communication between different people within India. So it was like a common language which could bridge the gap of linguistic difficulties. Then the major reason for the growing discontent was the reactionary policies of Lord Lytton. His policies were criticized because he had said to reduce the age limit for the Indian Civil Services examination from 21 to 19. So, like the maximum age at which you could appear to become an ICS personnel should be 19, is what was uh, like reformed by Lytton, and this was protested by the Indian Association, about which we will study further in this video. Then there was Delhi Darbar, which was organized. It was a lavish Delhi Darbar. There was so many celebrations and a hefty amount of money spent on Delhi Darbar, even though the nation was stricken with famine. Like you could see the contrast of the situation. Like there were British who were enjoying a Delhi Darbar type of occasion, and while on the other side there were the general Indians who were dying of hunger. They didn't have adequate amount of resources to feed themselves. Like such a contrasting situation. And also, the Vernacular Press Act. Vernacular basically refers to the local languages. So, in this act, basically, they were trying to curtail the seditious voices which were emerging, the seditious local language newspapers and printables or journals, because they were criticizing the government for its policies. And it was termed as a gagging act because they were trying to curtail all of the press freedom, which was protested a lot. Like I remember there's one provision in the act. There was one provision in the act whereby the district magistrate could actually seize your belongings related to the press items, for example the printing machine and all, if they find an instance of you uh, writing seditious uh, articles about the government, whereby this act was not applicable to the English newspapers, and there were many newspapers who converted uh, from local languages to English within a night. For example, the Amrita Bazaar Patrika, this was the one who actually switched its language to English in order to bypass this very act. However, after subsequent protest, it was later repealed by Lord Ripon. There was also the passage of the Arms Act, according to which Indians had to obtain a license in order to carry firearms, whereas it was totally good or totally exempted for the Europeans. So Europeans can take firearms and shoot anybody or do whatever they like, and whereas Indians had to carry all those licenses and stuff. You could see the Indians were facing a very bad uh, tormentious rule. And there was this Ilbert Bill controversy. This was during Lord Ripon's time. The Indian judges were allowed to try the Europeans, and this led to the Indian position at par with the Europeans. Like they were regarded now as equals if this act is concerned. So this was one of the major steps in the dilution of racial superiority. But this didn't go well with the Europeans, mainly because they wanted to have some sort of uh, superior standing with the Indians, and thus this act met with stiff opposition from the Europeans, and therefore it was withdrawn. And there was this rise of the middle class intelligentsia, which was instrumental in providing the leadership to the movement, because they were the ones who were disseminating the Western thought as well. Then there are the political associations before the INC. First of them is Bang Bhasha Prakashika Sabha, which was established in 1836 by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the social reformer I was talking to you about. Then is the Zamindari Association. Zamindari basically is Zamindar is somebody who has a lot of area under cultivation, and he might give it to the roads or landless laborers like that. So he basically owns a large amount of area, and which can be called as the landholder in English. That's why this is the landholder society, and it was mostly concerned with the issues faced by the landholders. So it had a very skewed opinion about that. It was established by Dwarkanath Tagore, who is the grandfather of Rabindranath Tagore. So this was also it has significance because it was the beginning of an organized political activity. It used constitutional agitation as its means to attain its goals. Then we have the Bengal British India Society, which was established by George Lake Thompson, and there were many other leaders associated with it. The British Indian Association was a merger of the Bengal British India Society and the Landholder Society, the president of which was Radhakant Deb. This association was of significance because the Charter Act of 1853 was passed because of its efforts, and which led to the addition of six members to the Governor General's Council. And then you have the East India Association, which was established by Dadabhai Naroji in London in order to gain the localites or the English support to the Indian cause. Dadabhai Naroji is also called as the Grand Old Man of India. He's the first economic thinker, the first Indian in the House of Commons, and he has been elected three times as the president of the INC. It's a commendable feat he's achieved thrice as the president of INC. He was also the author of Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, which basically exposed the ill effects of economic drain which the British were causing in India. Then there is this Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, headed by M.G. Ranade, Mahadev Govind Ranade. He was also a justice. Then the Indian League by Shishir Kumar Ghosh, who is also associated with Amrit Bazar Patrika. Then the most important of these modern nationalistic groups was the Indian National Association, which is also known as the Indian National Conference or Indian Association. This was established by Surendranath Banerjee, which is also known as the Indian Burke, and Anand Mohan Bose. So Indian National Association is very important because it protested the age reduction in the ICS. Like we have seen earlier, like how Lord Lytton had reduced the age in the civil services from 21 to 19, and it was protested by the Indian National Association. Also protested the Arms Act, the Vernacular Press Act. They organized an All India conference in Calcutta in 1883, This was a forerunner of INC, and it later merged in the INC in 1886. They also demanded the ICS exam in to be held simultaneously in India and England. Uh, this group basically was formed because they were discontented by the pro-landlord position of the British India Association. British India Association was basically a merger of the BBIS and the Landlord Society, right? So, Landlord Society, as I told you earlier, was skewed to the position of the landholders. And that is why this very association, the Indian National Association, was formed in order to provide voices to the unheard. Like they had kept their membership fee very low, and they also organized an all India conference. Like it was not just focused in Bengal, but to all of India. And this basically laid the groundwork for INC. Then we have Madras Mahajan Sabha, which was formed by Veera Raghavchari, T. Anand Charlu, and P. Subramania Iyer. Mahade, sorry, Madras Native Association by Guzulu Chetty, who was also who had his journal called The Crescent. Bombay Presidency Association by Badruddin Tayebji, Firosha Mehta, K.T. Telang. Badruddin Tayebji was basically the first Muslim president of the INC. Now let's go on to the Indian National Congress. So the Indian National Congress was basically founded with the efforts of Alan Octavian Hume, who was a Britisher. And the first session of the Indian National Congress was held in 1885 in Gokuldas Tejpal Sanskrit College of Bombay. You could see over here, this is the first picture of the delegates. Uh, in 1885, there were only 72 delegates, and it basically consisted of lawyers, journalists, social reformers. The first president was Vomesh Chandra Banerjee, and it was established during the watch of Viceroy Lord Dufferin, who was very much critical about the formation of Congress, and he has expressed it in many different words. For example, he called Congress as the factory of sedition, uh, a group of seditious Brahmins and disloyal Babus. So, in order to give a nationwide characteristic and in order to consolidate the different political activities, there were annual meetings held mostly during the time of December. So, but the main reason is why was INC formed? Like we had different organizations running on, but what was the need for the formation of the Indian National Congress? And everybody has their different theories. The first theory is the safety valve theory, which was given by Lala Lajpat Rai. According to him, Congress was formed in order to channelize the growing discontent within the Indians. It was like a safety valve which is used in the pressure cookers, and it is a small outlet to let off the uh, rising gas within, rising pressure. So this is why it he called it as a safety valve. It was like channelizing the fuming Indians into a organization whereby they were more uh, letting them vent it out rather than emerging it as a more uh, discontent led struggle. Then there is this conspiracy theory by R.P. Dutt. He said that in order to abort the popular uprising, the uh, formation of Congress was done. And then there is this lightning conductor theory by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who says that the Congress basically used the Yom in order to uh, bring the nationalists together. But these are just theories, and the actual reason for the formation of the INC was first to politicize and politically educate people. then was to establish a headquarters because until then they were all scattered here and there, some in Bengal, some in Madras, some in Pune, as we have seen. So it provided a headquarters to the nationwide struggle. It also facilitated national unity. It was created in order to fund a democratic nationwide movement and to promote the anti-imperialist ideology. So, like all of the different delegates would come under one single banner, and then they could actually carry on with their struggle. Like they had their common objective, right, which was to uh, bring betterment and welfare towards Indian and to thwart the uh, hegemonious British rule. Although in different places they had different means and different ideologies of what was good for India, but basically they had the common objective of uh, bringing a better political system in India. So the first phase of the INC, if we categorize it as, would be the moderate phase, which was from 1885 to the 1905. So this is a summary of the important sessions during this phase and their president as well as some details about it. So the first session, as we've seen, it was in 1885 in Gokuldas Stage Parsons College in Bombay. President was Homesh Banerjee. In 1886, it was in Calcutta by Dadabhai Naroji, which witnessed the merger of the INC as well as the National Conference or the Indian National Association. In 1887, in Madras, President was Badruddin Tyabji, and it had an appeal to Muslims to join the INC. In 1888, in Allahabad, President was George Yule, the first non-Indian president of INC. So even though AOU was the founder, he was not the president. He was not the president of INC. The first non-Indian president of Indian National Congress was George Yule. In 1896 in Calcutta, Rahimatullah M. Sayani was the president, and the national song Vande Mataram was sung for the first time. In 1905, Banaras session, which is very popular for different reasons, Gopal Krishna Gokhale was the president, and we would read about this resentment and Swadeshi movement later. So basically, what were the moderates? Who are these moderates, and why do we call them that? Basically, these were the believers of liberalism, modern politics, as well as constitutional agitations, like agitating but being within the confines of law. They were believers or staunch believers of law. They basically believed in the three P's, which were prayer, petition, and protest. They also believed in the providential mission of the British. So they were of the opinion that British basically wanted to be just to the Indian society, but they didn't know how to do so. They were unaware of the ground realities, and if they come to know of that, they would definitely do so. This was the thinking of the moderates, and we know how the Britishers were, but this is what the moderates thought of at that point of time. So they basically wanted to create public opinion through education, and because of this, they leveraged press. There were many different journals, different newspapers, pamphlets, all around the nation. They used to write different articles in order to educate people about different issues. They wanted to increase Indian participation in the legislative councils, and they were of the opinion that right now is not the correct time for a direct challenge because there were different divisions in the society as well, and first and foremost our goal should be to weld them into a nation. So what were the major demands of moderate leaders? They had constitutional demands as well as administrative demands. So in constitutional demands they wanted council elections, then they also wanted two Indian members in Viceroy's Executive Council. They were of the opinion that there should be a right to discuss and vote on the budget. and no taxation without representation, because there was hardly any Indian representation. And they had some administrative demands as well. First was the reduction of the maximum age of ICS, separation of executive from judiciary, Indianization of the Indian civil services, and holding of ICS in India also. Reduction in the defense expenditure. So the aid expenditure or the military expenditure which the Britishers were using from the Indian treasury, they just wanted to reduce that. They criticized the bureaucratic as well as the judicial system during British rule. They also criticized the aggressive foreign policy in Indians' neighborhood, basically in Burma and Afghanistan. They also wanted an increase in expenditure on welfare, better treatment of Indian labor abroad in the British colonies. Also, these are some of the other notable points: abolition of salt tax, reduce the land revenue, encourage modern industry through tariff protection and direct government aid. This would basically help in protection of the local industries which were destroyed by the advent of British finished goods. So, what were the contributions of these moderates? The first and the most significant of their contributions was their economic critique of British India. They basically emphasized on the idea that how the British were economically draining India. For example, like they were importing the raw materials like cotton, spices, everything, and they were using India as their export destination for finished goods. So India was basically exporting the raw material which it could have leveraged if it had the modern industry and could have gained the foreign reserves, but it was actually being depleted of its capabilities and resources. The Indian treasury was used to fund the British employees, their retirements, pension funds, etc., and they would eventually settle in their home countries, and that wealth was drained. Uh, they were also using India's treasury fund in their aggressive foreign adventures. So, this was highlighted by Dadabhai Naoroji in his book called The uh, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, by R.C. Dutt in Economic History of India, and G. Subramania Iyer in The Economic Aspect of British Rule in India. They also contributed to legislative reforms. So it is because of their efforts the Indian Councils Act of 1892 was passed, which basically provided some expansion to the council in both imperial and provincial legislatures. But this was also inadequate in respect of what was demanded by the moderate leaders. They also facilitated national unity. They promoted the defense of civil rights because they advocated freedom of press and speech. They opposed the aggressive foreign policy of the Britishers, and they laid the foundation well and deep. So the moderate phase of the INC is termed as the uh, seed phase of modern nationalism, and they sowed the seed well and deep. But they also had some limitations. The most prominent of this limitation was that they had a narrow social base. As you have seen, like it was mostly the lawyers, the journalists, the people who were well read and already had a prominent position in the society. So it was the educated middle class which were uh, like involved in these activities, but there was lack of the masses, and until and unless the masses are involved, it could not uh, take a militant position, and therefore a nationwide struggle could not be done. Also, they were very much in the confines of law. They just hated anything which was beyond a constitutional agitation, and that is why it led to the differences with the extremists, which would uh, come into prominence in the later years. They were of the opinion that the divisions in the Indian society must be welded before entering into the political arena or the political sphere. So, what was government's response? Like, government would not just sit back and see what the Indians were doing. It would definitely react, and sometimes passively, sometimes more uh, repressively and directly. So, it came in with the policy of divide and rule. So, it basically placated a few leaders to counterbalance the Congress. So, some of them were Sayyid Ahmad Khan, Raja Shiv Prasad of Banaras, who formed the United India Patriotic Association in order to counter the Indian National Congress. They also had this carrot and stick policy whereby they were placating moderates vis-a-vis the extremist, a carrot for the moderates, and repressing the stick to the extremist. Lord Curzon basically called for a peaceful demise of INC. So he basically said that he was looking forward for Congress to have a peaceful demise. So this was all about the moderate phase as well as the beginning of the modern nationalism in India. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, see ya. Bye.